What's going on, everyone? I am at the lake today and I'm gonna be fishing something that I am god awful at. Actually, I don't even know how bad I really am because I never do it. And if you have watched the channel before, you probably know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about big, well, I don't want to say big, larger swim baits. These aren't going to be some of the giant ones that you see people hucking and having a bunch of success with and, you know, catching giant fish. These are going to be more in like the, I don't know, 6, 8, 10-inch range. I'll show you some examples in a second. But before I get into like some of the details and how I'm gonna approach this and, you know, and how it applies to you and how it could help you, I just want to say thank you for checking out this video. Thanks for stopping by the channel. We love having you here. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, ring the notification bell so you can see we post the next video. Give me a like, and if you feel like it, go ahead, leave a comment down below. Let me know what I'm missing, what I'm screwing up, what I forgot, what I got wrong. We're happy to have all that here, and we will certainly make follow-up videos if there's any like big mistakes or any like big things that we like totally missed or figured out while we were on the water. We certainly, like the whole point of what it is that we're doing here, one with the new podcast, The Aggressively Average Angler, which if it's not already out, should be out very soon with the next couple of days, is it's learning together. Like you are going to watch Jeff and I fish what we're terrible at and then try and get incrementally better every single time that we go out. We'll show you some of the strategies that we're using, the baits that we're using, and then ultimately how we are learning along the way. And what's really great about the podcast is it's going to connect to these videos. So today, for example, I'm gonna go fish some big swim baits. I'll let you know some of the research that I did, what I learned, what I tried, what worked, what didn't. And then during the podcast, we'll go through all that and we'll bring some guests on who are experts or at least much better and much more skilled than we are at fishing baits like this so that you can learn from them and then watch another video of hopefully us having at least a little bit more success. Enough of that, let's get to the swim baits. So here's an example of one of the baits that I'm gonna be using. This is the Trace from 6th Sense. Cool bait, have fished it maybe 2 or 3 times. Wonderful bait. It's got 3 joints. It's maybe 7 inches, something like that, 6, 7 inches long. Again, not a giant swim bait, but compared to most of the baits that you're using, and most of the baits for sure that I have experience with, is a larger swim bait. The rod and the setup that I'm using, I have the Dobbins Fury series. This is their swim bait slash umbrella rig setup. It is a, let me make sure I get this right, it is an 8-foot, 20 to 40 pound line, 2 to 8 ounce heavy fast action rod. You can see it's got the longer handle for launching some of those bigger baits, and it is freaking hefty, and it has a heck ton of guides. I have on here I think 50-pound braid and then like 20-pound or 25-pound mono, something like that. I'm using the mono to braid because one, I do want the sensitivity and control, but realistically that mono is going to help stretch a little bit. If I have a backlash, I'm hopefully not going to lose the entire bait. That's really the deal here. I do have a Shimano Cardiff. This is a 31A, the 301A, whatever you want to call it. That's what that looks like. It's kind of like an old man style looking deal here, but it's actually pretty light. It holds just the right amount of line, and it has a slower rate of retrieve. This is a wonderful, to me, a wonderful setup, at least again with my novice knowledge, for being pretty inexpensive and still getting the job done with some of these big swim baits. The weight range on this rod is 2 to 8 ounces, so that should give me exactly what I need for what I'm fishing. I think the heaviest swim bait I have is like 3 ounces, and it's a slow sink, so nothing crazy. Bee, another bee, stop. I don't love bees, by the way, and this one loves me. Again, I do not fish swim baits a ton, so I don't have a ton of setups. This is actually my frog and stick. It's a Veritas PLX by Abu Garcia. It is a heavy rod and it throws 3/8 to 1.5 ounces. So that's gonna be a little just fine for some of these smaller size, maybe wake baits or swim baits. So this is, you know, this is kind of, I'll explain why I have this type of setup. I have another heavy rod in here. I think it goes up to 1.5 ounces as well. So I have 2 heavy rods. This one's probably primarily the one I'm gonna use. And yes, this is an 8 to 1 to Tula. Like this just doesn't make sense, but I'm gonna make it work for the day. I think I'm gonna be just fine. We'll get through it. Okay, one of the things I wanted to cover is like, how am I going to approach a technique that I'm totally new to, that I have virtually no experience with? How am I gonna approach it? How am I going to ensure that even if I don't catch any fish, that I'm successful and I'm still enjoying myself? One of the things that I think is really important when you're first getting into a technique is to do your research. So I've gone out, I've watched some YouTube videos from some folks that have done, you know, extensive amounts and put tons of research and put tons of hours on the water, fishing swim baits, and had success. Milliken, I think, is a great example. So watch some YouTube videos, read some articles, and then, you know, again, just trying to soak up as much information as possible prior to going out on the water. What if I learned that I'm going to be trying to use today? One, that profile is probably more important than color, but color does matter. And so that's something I'm gonna focus on. I'm gonna focus on finding the profile that those fish are after, whether it's a larger profile, a medium profile, taller, more of a wake bait, sinking, floating. That's what I'm looking for. The next thing that at least again from my understanding and my research is action, and specifically action paired with where the fish are that you're targeting, right? So if you're in 10 feet of water and you've got tall grass, that's going to be one type of action. If you're fishing shallow water, it's going to be maybe something a little bit different than those fish are looking for. I know what I'm looking for today. Today I'm going to be looking at pretty trim water, like 4 feet, maybe 5 feet, with drop-offs nearby. If I'm not finding fish there, I'm gonna find these troughs next to some bowls, and that may even be higher up in the water column or lower. I'm not really sure, but those are the two types of areas that I think I'm gonna find fish today. And I'm hoping that my sonar is going to help me find those fish, so I can watch how they're reacting to these big swim baits with the Garmin Live Scope. Number 2 is patience. I know that kind of maybe goes without saying with fishing, but I think maybe with swim bait fishing it goes, it's maybe even more important, right? Because you're using a larger profile, you're not going to get a bunch of dinks to sort of like get you super pumped and, you know, like sort of get your confidence rolling. And the way that these baits are made to move, it's really more about like watching how they're working, finding, you know, that slow rate of retrieve, kind of like with a crankbait, trying to make sure that you are working the bait at the proper speed, which probably is a little bit slower than like maybe what you're used to with other techniques. So I'm gonna be focused on taking my time. And then the last thing with swim bait fishing is just stick with it, right? And it just make sure that you are giving it like the entire day, enough time, don't give up on it. And that actually leads me into what is sort of like what I would say is the next piece of advice I have if you're tackling a new technique. So like do the research for sure, make sure you get the right combos, right? So I have at least one combo that's gonna be really, really effective, and I have another one that's like okay for what it is that I'm doing. So like I'm set up to like fish the way that I'm supposed to, but after that, it's about how do you approach that day, right? Like you could go in maybe expecting to catch a ton of fish. You could go into it, you know, all gung-ho, super aggressive, super excited, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can lead to some poor results if that doesn't happen right away. I think the best example of this is like the first time I ever went fly fishing. I was super excited about it. I thought I was gonna catch a ton of fish. I thought it'd be super easy. I struggled so hard. I was like amazingly bad. Could not cast anything but like a coil of line 10 feet away from me, and I was god awful. I didn't catch anything for the first 5-6 trips. And what I was doing is I was getting disheartened, and I was moving away. Like if I didn't catch anything in the first like half hour, hour and a half, I would move away. I would go back to my truck. I'd get my ultralight rig, go in the river, and just go catch fish, you know, with my regular setup, and I'd kind of give up earlier than what I should have. So my goal today is adjusted from where maybe it normally is. Usually I'm like, okay, I want to start catching some fish, see some success, then go try and catch some bigs, right? Maybe that's how I normally approach a day. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out on the water, and my only goal is to just learn a few things. I really don't care whether or not I catch fish. If I learn 1 or 2 things and I become more versed in the technique, and I learn something I can take into my next trip, I'm gonna be totally happy. And I like sincerely mean that. Like go into it understanding that like today is not the day probably, or maybe, that you're not gonna catch fish. Your goal really is learn something new that you can apply to the next time you go out. If that's how you start the day, you're gonna take your time with your rigs. You're gonna maybe take 10 more casts with the same swim bait or whatever it is that you're using than you wouldn't have before, because you would have given up early. And I promise you that if you approach it with the intent of just learning something, your definition of success is gonna be so much more clear and something that's very achievable. You are going to learn something if you put time out on the water. It's one of the like guaranteed truths of fishing is more time on the water, more time spent with the technique, you are going to get better. Period, the end. It's going to happen. So that's enough of the learning stuff. Again, I said I was going to show you some of the baits. I'll show you what I'm using. This is technically not a big swim bait. This is technically a wake bait. This is the BioShed wake bait from Fish Lab. This is a 2 3/4 ounce, 6-inch bait. It's kind of a giant. It's got a big body. I'm really excited to try and use it. I do have the smaller version of this one. It's about half the size, but really cool bait. I'm excited to get this one. I'm excited to get this one on the water. Now my collection, if you want to call it that, my selection is not gigantic because I don't fish this technique. Honestly, I end up giving these away a lot of times. We'll buy them, we'll get them sent to us, you know, whatever. And what I'll end up doing is just being like, you know what, I don't fish this very often. Someone else really wants to try this bait or is excited about getting it. I'm just gonna give it away. So a lot of these just kind of cycle through the tackle boxes and go into the mail to people. But But this one is from Fish Lab. This is an incredible looking swim bait, and it's at a really good price point. It's a relatively inexpensive one. And when I'd say relatively inexpensive, like, let's realize that some of these are well into the hundreds of dollars. Even like a normal swim bait, like $100 is like a good swim bait price, you know, again, at least to my knowledge. So these are definitely in the sub 100. This is kind of like, I think, the answer to the S waiver, which I know is a lot of people sort of entry level into a solid swim bait that's going to be really reliable and quality. I think this is right in the same vein, so this is kind of what I'm treating as that bait. So I have this one in actually 4 different colors. There's a gold shiner that I have that I didn't bring, and then a trout pattern I didn't bring, but I brought the bone. This is one of my favorite colors, especially higher up in the water column. And then I brought something really natural. This is sort of like a shad pattern, the same exact bait. I think these are really cool, and 3 ounces on these ones, so they are not small, but again, it's all relative, right? So as far as like big swim baits go, they're probably in the small medium. This is the Hardcore Ninja Twitchin' Glider, the 180 SS, single jointed rubber tail, a little bit smaller. This one is probably in the 6-inch range as well, and I do not know how heavy it is, to be honest with you guys. I totally forgot. But I do have a rod that can handle it, so I don't really care. Interested to see how this one compares to some of these other larger swim baits that I've got in the box. We will see. Now this is another one from Fish Lab that I am gonna absolutely be busting out today. It is in gold, and it's got 4 different body pieces, right? So 3 joints and then the head. This is a prototype that came from their new line of swim baits. Same style, same body style as that wake bait, but this is a sinking, I think this is a 2 or 2.5 ounce bait. Very cool. They just released these at iCast if you want to get sort of all the details on them, because I don't have them here in my brain. But a really cool swim bait that I'm really excited to try out. Again, this is a soft tail, which is kind of interesting, but it's still pretty hard plastic, so very durable, not gonna come apart. This is one of the ones I'm actually most interested to try and fish. I might throw the tracer on for a hot minute and then swap out to this one almost immediately. I just think this is a wonderfully cool looking bait. Cannot wait to fish it. Here's the smaller version of that wake bait. This might even be 2.5 inches. My brain made this a lot bigger than it was. It's not a huge bait, pretty small, but this is a wake bait, technically not a big a swim bait, but to me it's a larger body bait. This is more of like, the rest of the stuff you're gonna see is more like confidence builder size, right? Like, my goal by fishing these baits is really just to build some confidence. Like, hey, they're chasing maybe this profile, this type of action. Now I can upsize it because I have larger versions of these baits. I can upsize it, and I know in my head, like, fish are chasing this, they will chase the larger size as well. So that's really my goal by having some larger ones and then a couple smaller ones as well. Again, talking to a Ned Rig fisherman or a finesse fisherman going up to this larger size, confidence is key, so I'm just trying to build a little bit of confidence and maybe learn something. Got another jointed guy, a little one. This is that baby bull shad. Then we got 2 of these single jointed guys from 6 cents. Again, smaller options, but it's gonna tell me if that single bodied, that single joint body bait is working. So that's really it for the tackle box. That's it for the tackle talk. Now it's time to go learn. All right, we had a nice little run with that wake bait, but now we're gonna switch over to the 6 cents Trace. Pretty cool swim bait. I'm really hoping that I do have a little bit of familiarity with this one. Not a lot, but I've taken it out 5 or 6 times. It has gotten wet, and so I'm hoping that experience will help me out a little bit as I get started here. So I'm just about to hit the main section of the lake where I'm hoping I can do a little damage. I know there's like 2 really good spots right here, so fingers crossed for me. All I need to do is get lucky. Forgot how freaking good this thing looks in the water. It's totally insane. I'm just trying the slowest retrieve that I can like mentally manage right now, and just trying to keep this thing low-ish in the water. That's all I'm trying to do. Oh, holy fart, that thing splashes. This is why you can't bring your ultralight. There's like 100 bluegill perch right here, and I don't even have my ultralight because of this exact reason. I'd be trying to catch those fish. There's a bass, like, tasting my lure. I could see him on the sonar. I brought him all the way up to the boat. Shoot, he's gone. Okay. All right. Okay, I just was retrieving super slow, and I saw, he's still right underneath me. I saw a bass on my sonar right behind where my lure was. So I reeled up a little bit further, I look down, and sure as anything in this world, there was a bass. He's right on my lure. Was like literally licking the tail. And I was like, oh my God. So I don't know what the lesson is, but I know that I'm drawing a fish in. Let me keep fishing over here. Mission kind of accomplished. A little bit accomplished. I'm gonna call that success. I think I had a bite. Oh, I definitely did. That was the bass right there. I feel like that was a bee again? Why? I feel like that was a big mistake, like trying to set the hook, like after feeling a tick. That was a hit. No question about it. Okay. Like I was saying before, I was rudely interrupted by a fish. I think like, I'm assuming I'm gonna get like bushwhacked by one of these fish. Like they're not gonna be like, and I'm gonna have to like set the hook on them. So I probably need to rethink my strategy here as far as hook set goes. All right. So I'm gonna switch away from the trace just for learning purposes. Nothing wrong with the bait. I think it's actually working pretty darn well. I'm gonna swap out here for something just a little bit different to see how it goes. I'm also gonna swap out for a heavier bait just to try one out. Go with something totally different, maybe bone. Let's give it a shot. So I gave that first lure like 30 minutes. Not the longest, maybe 45 minutes, not quite an hour. Maybe not the longest time in the world, but I feel like I gave it a fair shake. I did get some action on it, but it wasn't consistent. So I tried a few things. Now I'm gonna switch to something different. See how this larger bait works for me? Oh, this is a glide bait, so it should be gliding. I feel like I'm supposed to impart more action on this bait. Tell me if I'm wrong. Am I supposed to just do it through my retrieve? I'm gonna try the twitches. I'm gonna try and mix up my retrieve speed. So the action on this thing is like kind of subtle as I'm watching it. I almost have to work it like maybe a jerk bait. Let me give that a shot, see how it goes. Oh, that's a lot of bait to hook. Interesting. I'm learning stuff. I will say I'm learning this. There's a lot of power in the pause on this glide bait. Every time I pause it, I can even see it on sonar, but even when I've got it in more shallow water, when I pause that thing, it is swishing, and then like, I mean, it is like, it falls perfectly level and just sinks real slow. There's power in the pause. All right, I'm loving what I'm getting, the action I'm getting out of the glide bait. I'm running it kind of like a walking bait twitch, and it's moving what I think is actually pretty nice. Maybe, I don't know if that's how it's supposed to move, but man, it sure looks like a swimming fish to me. And then when you pause it, it just sort of like kicks and sinks. It's just like dead. I like that. I was gonna switch off this bait. I'm gonna stay on it for a little bit. Might just go to a different spot nearby to some fish that I haven't kicked the crap out of yet and cannonballed. All right, I'm gonna switch it up here. I'm gonna move off the glide bait. I'll be honest, I feel like I've learned more in the last hour fishing this glide bait than I did, I don't know, in all the time watching videos. So I feel like that was actually really helpful to just put a little time into it. Did I catch any fish? No. But did I learn a lot? I feel like I actually did. I'm gonna fish something a little bit like the trace, but like totally bigger body. This is that like BBZ, Big Bass Zone Fish Lab collaboration. So I'm gonna try this bad boy out. We'll see how it fishes. That'll be the real test. Okay, I'm getting ready to head in. I got out here at like 2:30. It's 5 o'clock almost. Not a ton of time today, but the goal was, if you recall, was to learn a couple of things, right? Make sure that I learned a couple of things. If I caught fish, great. If not, fantastic. Again, that was not the point. The point was to test some things out, learn some things, and then bring that into my next fishing trip. So what did I learn today? One, I learned that this setup works fairly well for casting and retrieving. I learned that it is a fast action, and when you twitch, the bait twitches. So I am happy with my setup, which gives me some confidence, again, going into my next trip. What did I learn about each type of bait? I learned that these bullshad type jointed baits, it's more, for me at least, again, my initial impression, it's more about the retrieve speed and the pauses than it is about the rod tip and your manipulation of the rod tip. And then taking advantage of that slow sink. If you don't really understand how fast or slow that bait is going to sink when you pause it, you're gonna end up getting stuck in the weeds. It happened a couple of times. It took me like kind of some fine tuning to get a good retrieve on. Now, what did I learn about the glide baits? That's where I probably learned the most. I learned that even though they're 3 ounces, the sink is actually relatively slow. I learned that the angle of your twitches that you're trying to use to give the glide bait, to get it to glide, the angle at which you do it is very important, and remaining consistent is important. So if I lifted my rod tip up before I twitched, the bait actually comes up and then sort of has to correct itself as it sinks, and it looks really unnatural. So that was a really big learning for me. And then if you just retrieve those things dead stick, they are just like a laser line, like log. They don't do anything, they just sort of are there. I also learned that with all of these baits, pausing is probably king. It seems like that's when I did get a few bites. It did seem like that's when I got the most interest. The other thing that I'll say lastly is having some sort of live scope or like, live view down below was incredibly helpful. The first fish that I saw, the only fish that I saw actually chase my bait, I actually saw it on sonar before I saw it in the water. So that was really, really cool. And I was able to see sort of whether the baits were rising or falling as I was retrieving them. I learned a lot just watching the baits on the Panoptics as I was retrieving them. Now, obviously, do you go, spend thousands of dollars on Panoptics just to learn about how a glide bait works? No, but it was a really useful tool. So that's what I learned today. Again, please leave me some comments. Let me know what I should be trying. What do I have completely wrong? What have I done right so far? So that I can take this and make another video of my second round out and hopefully, finally, catching some big fish. Really appreciate you guys sticking with me today. Hopefully you learned something from my time on the water today that you can take out with you as well. And if you're learning about big swim baits, let us know what you're struggling with. We're happy to try and help however we can, and we'll get some experts on the show to help round out our experience. If you have not already, please hit the subscribe button. We really appreciate it. Smash the notification bell so you can see when we post the next video. Hit the like button while you're there. And again, as always, please leave us some comments. We read every single one and we appreciate every single one. And we'll catch you out on the water.